Hey people! A lot of people often ask us, what white paint color should I use? What's the best white that pairs with this other color? Should I pick Simply White, Cloud White, Oxford White, Pure White? I'm here to tell you today that there's a good chance you don't need to use any of them. Let's talk about tinted whites versus a good old pre-mixed white. I want to go over 3 clear advantages of using pre-mixed white for your next paint project. I'm James from thepaintpeople.com, and if you're new here, welcome. If you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for subscribing. You may or may not know that we love to talk about all things paint here, including color. Especially in the interior painting space, finding the perfect white trim color tends to be a tricky thing to navigate. We get asked a lot of questions, and from our end, it's tough for us to give you concrete color advice about a specific project down in the comment section, considering we're not able to physically be in the space and see it for ourselves. The good news is, I can say with quite a bit of confidence that going with a pre-mixed white for your doors and trim will work 9 times out of 10. Let's go over the 3 major advantages of using a pre-mixed white, and then at the end of the video, I'm going to give you one important thing to consider when using pre-mixed whites. The first advantage is the easiness of it all. By picking white, you've instantly relieved yourself of the daunting task of going through all the potential off-whites you could use on your trim. You're essentially relinquishing yourself of that responsibility and just deferring to what the paint company themselves deem as being white. More often than not, a pre-mixed white will be free of any jarring undertones that could skew the color one way or another. But that's not to say that it will be the brightest possible white you can get either. Some companies' versions of white paint will be a little different than others, so just make sure you know that going into it. Luckily, in the grand scheme of things, these differences are minor and will only start to come through and be very noticeable when placed right next against another, perhaps different white. Long story short, if you use pre-mixed white on your trim, it's gonna look white. You don't have to worry about them looking creamy or yellow or dirty. They'll be white. The second big advantage is consistency. Pre-mixed colors are manufactured. They're put together at the supplier's factory rather than being tinted on site at your local paint store. And based on my personal experience, I found a much more consistent look and feel to pre-mixed colors compared to tinted ones. And the main reason for that is you're removing that extra step in the process. You're no longer having to rely on someone physically add tint to the product. It's already ready to go. When a can of paint is tinted, there's a certain formula that provides you all the different colorant that goes into it. And within that tinting process, mistakes can be made. You're adding that level of possible human error. The good news is, technology has advanced, and the paint tinting process is a lot more automated now, which has eliminated a lot of those minor tinting issues, but they can still happen. And when they do, it can present some serious problems because imagine you're in the middle of painting a whole hallway and you start applying some of your paint from your second can only to find out that it looks a bit pink compared to the first can you used. You're losing time, and most importantly, you're losing money. Pre-mixed white will pretty much give you the exact same product and experience no matter which paint store you're picking it up at, no matter which person is handling it, as long as the store has it in stock, of course. Finally, we have perhaps my biggest reason to use pre-mixed white paint, and that's coverage. Now, this next part is mainly due to my personal anecdotal experience throughout my years of painting, but I've talked to several other painters that feel the same way about pre-mixed paint. It just seems to cover so much better. When you think about it logically, a can of tintable paint, its sole purpose is to be flexible as to what color it'll end up being. But for a pre-mixed white, its sole purpose is to be a white paint. Now, a large part of this has to do with how modern paints are formulated. Some tint bases require a certain amount of colorant in order to activate the product, but an off-white, or especially a white color, requires very little colorant. Some products will compensate for this by adding a ton of white colorant into the formula as well, but others won't. And this creates a problem with coverage. You may not notice a massive difference when applying paint on trim and baseboards, for example, but you'll definitely notice it when painting a wall, as it could mean the difference between painting 2 coats or 3. I just wanted to touch on the variance in premixed whites from company to company. If you've been around paint for a long time or you're extremely sensitive to undertone differences, then it's definitely worth mentioning that Benjamin Moore's premixed white will look a little bit different from Sherwin-Williams, for example. Because of all the different products out there on the market, it's hard to go through every single one and describe the major differences, but what I can say is I found Benjamin Moore's premixed whites to be a little more gray leaning compared to Sherwin-Williams and Home Depot, which can have a tendency to appear a bit brighter and maybe even a bit more warm. Even the major paint companies can't really agree on what white should look like. So just make sure once you start with one company, whatever it is, keep using that same company's white and ideally the same product for the remainder of the project. While there are cases where it really does make sense to take extra time and find that perfect complementary off-white for your job, in a lot of cases, you don't need to. It's one of the things in painting and decorating that you don't always need to worry about too much. When in doubt, just default to plain old white and kiss. Keep it simple, subscriber. I would never call you guys stupid. Do you want to see another in-depth video on picking the perfect white? You can check that out over here. It further explores the notion that white as a paint color is so subjective. We do several videos every single week, so thank you guys so much for continuing to watch, like, and comment on our videos. The Paint People team appreciate it immensely. That's it for this one. See you on the next one.